Sasakawa and Elie Wiesel founded Forum 2000 for a purpose.
We have to use the past to not becoming our children's future.
Thank you very much. I am honored to be here, and I want to thank President Havel for convening another extraordinary gathering of Forum 2000.
So those people, they are peace, not kingdom, more seriously. And we should develop new ideas. And then important is implementation.
Dámy a pánové, vážení přítomní, já vás co nejsrdečněji vítám na konferenci Forum 2000.
The world is upside down. How should we put it back together? Are we able to act responsibly? Can we work together, play by the rules, and restore solidarity? Let's use this crisis as an opportunity. A new world emerging? Watch the online Forum 2000 conference, October 12th to 14th.
Okay. Good morning or afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, depending where you are in the world. My name is Švejnar. I am professor at Columbia University, where I also direct the Center on Global Economic Governance, and I'm also chairman of the Executive and Supervisory Committee of CERGI, a joint workplace of Charles University and the Academy of Sciences in Prague. With me is Jeffrey Sachs, professor at the Columbia University, so we're a colleague. This is almost like an intramural discussion here, but we of course welcome you all to partake with us and ask questions. We'll be talking about the economic priorities for a new world, to what extent we can actually take advantage of the disaster, of the crisis in which we are. The layout will be such that Jeff will start with an initial set of remarks. I will follow him, and then we'll have a discussion into which we will incorporate whatever we can actually hear from you in terms of questions and everything. So Jeff, please go ahead, take it from here.
Jan, thank you so much. It's wonderful to have a chance to chat with you, but especially to be back at Forum 2000. We go back with this forum a long way, both of us, and it's been a great honor to be part of this ongoing global symposium in honor of Václav Havel and his legacy from the start. But what a weird time we are now. This is definitely the most unusual moment I think that the world has faced since the start of Forum 2000, and arguably really since the Second World War, or maybe the dramatic events of 1989. In other words, the world is just upside down. I would say if we look back to the beginning of this forum a quarter century ago and where we are today, boy, we didn't anticipate so many of the issues that we're grappling with now. Certainly, these pandemics, which are not just this one, but it's been one after another of newly emerging diseases, a kind of symptom of the overall environmental crisis that the world is facing, which wasn't so clearly in our minds, I would say, a quarter century ago. Geopolitics is changing dramatically. It's part of the story. Amazingly, this year, the continued relative rise of Asia is actually accelerated because Europe and the US are in deep crisis and deep economic decline, whereas China is actually going to have economic growth this year because they stopped the pandemic. and it has enabled them to have an economic rebound. So what allowed COVID-19, why we're not getting it under control, the environmental challenges of climate change, which will involve a lot about how we rebuild from here, and the changing geopolitics, also on the brink of the U.S. election, which is going to mean a lot for the world.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. I think this situation is unprecedented. When we look back all the way to World War II, since then, it's something that came suddenly. We've been unprepared. It is true that there were people who were saying we need to get ready for the pandemic. It might come, but we really have been caught off guard. Different countries have handled it very differently. As you say, China, where it was very tough at the very beginning and where it originated, has actually managed, together with some other countries like South Korea, to handle the situation relatively well. It is surprising now, as we are entering in many parts of the world, Europe and the Czech Republic, where the forum takes place, going through a very, very severe second wave, and the governments have been caught off guard. So I think the challenges are there. They are of the short-term nature of how you contain flare-up where it is very severe. And then the long term that you mentioned, which I think are very important in terms of the environment in general. And here I think the measures that the governments will take will be very important in some sense. Will they be decisive enough, both to handle the pandemic in the short run, and will they be decisive enough in terms of handling the medium and long-term issues, including the environment? Let me throw in a sort of a challenge here for you to take, and let's run with it. I think that we are in the era where governments of all ilk, all types, have decided that they do have to handle things very seriously, and they have started expending significant amounts of resources, some more efficiently than others. And I think this is something that we'll see now in the short run, and probably in the long run as well. And there are a whole bunch of ramifications, economic and political. What do you think?
Well, I was going to start by saying that when it comes to governance, there were actually studies and lists made, ironically, at the end of last year about which countries are most prepared for a global health crisis. And the country that was declared to be most prepared in the world was the United States. It was top of the list. And most of our familiar countries, including Czech Republic, including the countries of Western Europe, ranked very high on the list. And it turned out that list is completely upside down when it comes to what's actually happening right now. So it gives us reason to ask a very significant question: what is going on with our governance? Now, in the United States, it's pretty clear we have a president who absolutely ignores science from the moment he wakes up in the morning and starts tweeting until the end of the day. Sometimes it seems there is no end of the day because the tweets just keep coming. But he's completely against rational, logical science. And we now have 220,000 dead people in the United States from COVID, I think heavily at the responsibility of Trump. What's happening with our governments more generally, though? Why aren't we listening to evidence and undertaking systematic, science-based policies? I think it's a big challenge, actually, for all of the democracies, Europe and the United States. Some countries are doing a bit better, mainly the Nordic countries, but even there, Sweden has been an outlier, not a good performance at all. But most of the countries, not well. And in the Czech Republic, it was, of course, very sad that there was a sharp lockdown, and then somehow the idea was life could go back to normal. And now this disaster came. Where were the public health specialists to say, no, life can't go back to normal? We have to keep precautions, physical distancing, contact tracing, testing, face masks, all the basics of public health.
Yeah.
We never applied them in the United States. I don't think they were ever properly applied in the Czech Republic. They weren't properly applied in Spain, in France. It's really shocking to me. On the other hand, you know, if you look in Asia, China, but not just China, Taiwan, Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, two Anglo countries, did so much better. So I think that this is one thing, Jan, that we're really going to have to take to heart. This kind of winging it, that politics is a game. You don't have to attend to the facts. You can say what you want. In the United States, Trump says anything he wants, no matter how stupid. And in my opinion, it's usually very stupid every day. But it's a game. It's a game of image, a game of sound bites, a game of tweets. But it's deadly for us if we continue this way. So I think that this is, for me, the first takeaway. We have to get a lot more serious and a lot more systematic in what we're doing. As a very practical matter, you know, what the IMF came out with its economic outlook yesterday, the new one, and it showed that most of our countries are in a deep decline. And I think the lesson is, until we get the epidemic under control systematically, there can't be an economic recovery. The idea that, we don't want to lock down because that's bad for the economy is a little bit upside down. We don't want lockdowns, but we do want to control the virus. And that means making good public health measures so that life can get back to normal, not just pretending that we go straight back to normal and then have this massive second wave. So I think that this is, for me, the first lesson, a lesson of politics and governance. We have to be a lot more serious than we have been.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And the U.S. Oh, no. Sorry. Go on.
Go ahead. Yeah. Finish.
I was just going to say that, you know, maybe it's also the social media, the TV cable networks in the U.S., Fox News, or a president who tweets with capital letters and exclamation points, and this is somehow taken seriously. Presidents should not be on Twitter, period. You know, if they want to make messages, they should make systematic messages that are logical, sensible, proofread, spell checked. In other words, we shouldn't have the kind of nonsense that we have, because the whole world's lives are at stake right now. And politics can no longer be just a game of popularity or dissing an opponent. I know that's what politics is, but it can't be that way if we're going to stay alive at this point.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think that the seriousness of the situation has been underestimated, underrated, and as you say, a new style politics where the populists are really basically playing a game, and human lives and suffering is at stake, is very serious. I think that the fact that scientific evidence and data have not been really respected and used enough, that's true everywhere around the world. In some countries, even more so than others. Czech Republic, for instance, where we are now speaking, is an example where even the scientific community has sent different messages, which of course aggravates the problem, because the politicians then say, look, we hear different things from different scientists. I think the advantage in other countries, United States in particular, is that the scientific community has been somewhat united in terms of their view. And so that, I think, is very, very important. I think that the danger that we also see right now is that the governance issue is so much a stake that large swaths of the population distrust the government, that the credibility of the governments has gone down. And as you say, in the United States, Donald Trump has been a prime example of it. And the US, I think, has to a large extent surrendered its leadership in the world to the respect that it had before. And obviously that can change with the change of administrations, but some of the damage is irreparable. And then, of course, governance affects the economic activity and level of economic activity. Let me shift here a little bit in the sense that I think the one thing that I found positive in this all sort of negative and down situation is that most governments did not hesitate, at least at the beginning, to go fiscally very actively into trying to help the economy. And that, I think, is important because that represents a change in paradigm on the part of some of the governments, some of the thinkers. And in particular, even in the United States, the fact that the first measure, for instance, included a big increase, temporary increase in unemployment benefits was a step in the right direction. That really the suffering of the people, if you look at the bottom 10% of population in most countries, they've been exposed to huge suffering during this, and of course others as well. But I think that's important that the governments have assumed and hopefully will assume as we go forward a more active more active role in this. And I think it'll be interesting to see how far they will go, because obviously there have been worries about the high level of indebtedness. The United States reaching debt to GDP at about 100% at this point. Italy started at 135, going up. The Czech Republic, by the way, is relatively low. It's gone from 30% of GDP to 40%. But there are many worries. People here are very conservative about the debt indebtedness, I think excessively so, given that the economy really does need a stimulus. And the latest figures from the IMF show it very conclusively. So I think that the question will be whether, in addition, the primary effect, of course, primary goal is to stop the pandemic, stop it, and resources need to be wisely expended. And then again, in the countries where we see the flare-up, I think we haven't done enough testing, enough tracing, smart quarantine type measures and so on. So I think that is the principal thing where what's important is to break the exponential growth that we see in some of these countries, Czech Republic including, and then having smart policies going forward. And as we are economists, I think that the economic measures of the governments will be important. And I think that at this point, the worry about indebtedness is a secondary worry. I think the primary is really how do you jumpstart the economy? How do you get it going again strong? Because frankly, the debt to GDP will decrease if GDP grows. If GDP does not grow, that problem will be even further exacerbated. We see it in the case of Greece in the last decade and a half. We see it in the opposite direction after World War II. Major economies have heavily indebted, but the debt went down over the following two and a half decades relative to GDP because GDP was growing so fast. So in that sense, really the focus, I think, should be on the government role. It shouldn't be blind, etc. But I think it should be a very decisive one. Jeff?
Yeah, I think in agreement with you, the best economic strategy is use public health measures like wearing face masks, keeping large meetings banned for the moment, stopping the transmission of the disease, contact tracing, and quarantining, all the basics. Use that because they're very low cost. That's not a lockdown. That is systematic public health to stop the transmission of the disease. That's how East Asia and the Pacific countries have done it. Then use government spending for a new investment-led recovery and growth. And here, I think what Europe has proposed at the level of the European Union, the European Green Deal, with a recovery fund that can support the transformation to renewable energy, electric vehicles, smart grids, sustainable land use is really a good strategy for Europe. So the fact that the European Union has adopted a European Green Deal with many different dimensions to it, and then established a recovery fund and a substantial budget for public investment, is the best hope. We don't want to use government budget money just to make up for the failure of controlling the epidemic. We want to use government budget money for investment in the future. And I think Europe has set a template for that. But first, Europe has to control the pandemic, and that it hasn't done. And that's the first order of business, as you said. There are a number of questions asking, can we afford a second lockdown? Or how are other countries doing it? And I do want to emphasize the issue isn't a lockdown. The countries that have succeeded, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, China, if they had a lockdown, it was very short. What they really did was contact tracing. What they really did was isolating people that were infected. What they really did was universal wearing of face masks, not parading around saying we have the freedom to infect other people, but just good discipline to say we don't want to infect other people. What they did was widespread testing. So they did it systematically and with minimum rhetoric and maximum action, and without the populism of, say, a Trump who just creates noise rather than any solutions. So it's not lockdown versus virus, it's public health versus virus. And then one has the chance to have real economics. But I would say one more point on this about the science. The same problems have come in the Czech Republic and the US in discussing climate change, because our governments have not been driven by science. They've been driven by emotion or silly debate. There have been presidents of the Czech Republic who have been against climate science. That's awful. Again, if we go down that route of letting populism dictate our policies, we'll wreck everything. The reason we have the well-being that we do usually in our countries is because we have let science and technology have its place in our society, rationality. And the same is true with climate change and environmental protection. The populists will wreck us. Trump says exactly the same about climate that he does about COVID. He says, oh, it'll go away. It'll get colder. Well, he's a dimwit, by the way. Sorry to say it, but he doesn't know what he's talking about. And the reason I care about that is that we're in his hands as long as he's president. We're going to try to do something about that. I am next month. I hope he is gone. But this science-based policy is really important for our countries.
Yeah, you make a very important point. I think it's worth stressing even further that when you look in modern history, it was scientific development, scientific breakthroughs, the inventions and innovations that have really driven what we have accomplished in terms of the unprecedented wealth, living standards, arts, creativity, and so on. And I think that has to be, again, brought back. So I think that governments need to get credibility. They have to have a really clear policy, something that's credible, that the citizens will trust and follow, because it is common action that's needed here. The questions about lockdown and so on, as you've already pointed out, that's not the primary issue. I think the primary issue, sure, when you have a true emergency, and Czech Republic is a good example, you need temporarily for 2 weeks, stop, limit activities of all kinds, and start immediately the measures like wearing of masks, tracing, quarantining and so on. And then, again, with full credibility and openness, it has to be explained to citizens very clearly that measures are being taken which will relax reasonably, rationally, so that the epidemic stays under control. And that the investment, you stress correctly, investment. I think what I would call wise investment, and it's an investment that has high social return, right? So nowadays, when interest rates are basically zero and countries can borrow and sustain higher levels of debt, and something that in the Czech Republic is not even should not be a big issue, then the investment for both short-term gains, be it in the tracing of people, medical, epidemiological investments are important, and investments in infrastructure, investments in the environment. Czech Republic in particular suffers from drought and other things which are, major issue. And I think the one thing you mentioned, which is very important, is that the European Union has decided to take a big step. The Recovery and Resilience Fund really is putting emphasis on a Europe-wide, for the first time, a major Europe-wide initiative, which, if successful, if correctly carried out, will have a major benefit for all the countries, both in the short run and in the long term. And Europe here is one area where it is a leader in terms of its concern and steps it's taking towards sustainable development. And I think that's very important.
I think it's also, thinking back to the beginning of this forum in 1996 and the early days after the end of the Cold War, we look to the European Union as a great hope for Czech Republic, for the new member states or the countries that would become the new member states. And the time has arrived now to make this really work. So I think that to get the good investments that we want to really build the future that we want, this is the time for Europe as Europe in a unified way to invest very, very boldly. And that's why I'm really pleased for a change in this rather negative time that the European Commission and the European Council, the heads of state, adopted a bold plan, Jan. As we've been saying, it's really a good plan. And I think the Czech Republic would benefit tremendously from a strong implementation of that plan. And one of the things in the plan, also the Horizon Europe part, is that Europe should be a powerhouse of knowledge and a powerhouse of research for future sustainable technologies. And here, too, the Czech Republic should shine because, Czech Republic is home to a great tradition of science and technology, to one of the world's greatest and oldest universities, Charles University, and all that it represents of leadership in knowledge for centuries. And so I'd like to see the Czech Republic stand up and say, we will help lead this scientific revolution into the future, renewable energy, new materials, new biomedical solutions, because the country has absolutely the potential to do that. But it is the opposite of populist politics. It's serious, science-based, technology-based politics within a European structure. And I think that that's the best hope.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I think the Czech Republic has tremendous tradition. I think the tribute we should pay, of course, in recent history is to Václav Havel, who was a far-sighted philosopher and politician, and indeed has set the course of the country. I think that going back more historically, you're absolutely right that the Czech Republic has had great inventors, scientists, and has a great generation of people here right now as well. And Jeff, I'd like to, since we are coming towards the end, I'd like to thank you in particular. For those who are not aware, Jeff has been very influential in the Czech Republic from the transition time, from the beginning, helping out both policy-wise and in establishing and developing the CERGI, Charles University Academy of Sciences joint workplace. And so, Jeff, thank you. This really has been a terrific thing. And thank you for participating in this panel, which has been, by the way, done jointly with Project Syndicate and the Center on Global Economic Governance at Columbia University. And we thank the organizers for giving us the opportunity to be here.
What a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.